Hello Year 3 and welcome to this week's geography work. Now we have finished our local area unit. So this week we are focusing on something called the London Climate Action Week 2020. Now I know it has London in the title and it is predominantly about London, but it will have an impact and it can influence things that we do in and around Earthling Borough. But before we get to that, there's a few other things that we need to know first of all. So, what is London Climate Action Week? Well, London Climate Action Week is a week-long event where climate experts and communities come together to discuss how we can cut and reduce carbon emissions. Last year was the first year the event was held and included around 150 events. This year, it was supposed to take place between the 27th of June and the 5th of July, but is having to be held in two parts. The first part is the 1st to the 3rd of July, and then the second part will be the 14th to the 20th of November, and that's due to the current pandemic. So what are carbon emissions? Well, carbon dioxide, otherwise known as CO2, is a gas that occurs naturally, but can also be generated by human activity. Living things, such as animals, cows, and that includes humans, release CO2 when they breathe. We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2, as you can see here on the diagram. The carbon dioxide is then absorbed by the oceans and plants, which then release oxygen back into the atmosphere. There is a natural balance between the two which is needed. However, human activity, such as transportation, burning of fossil fuels like oil, coal, and natural gas, and extracting and refining oil all create large quantities of carbon dioxide, which is also then released into the atmosphere. Are carbon emissions good or bad? Carbon dioxide is known as a greenhouse gas. That means that CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere helps to trap heat close to the Earth and helps to keep us warm. So it can be a good thing. However, too much CO2 in the atmosphere leads to the Earth heating up too much, which is having a negative impact on the planet. This is where we are seeing the polar ice caps melting, sea levels rising, plants flowering earlier than expected, warmer winters, and so on. If you'd like to know more, I would recommend following this link on the PowerPoint and watching this video. It really clearly explains what the greenhouse effect is and why it's so important. So why is London Climate Action Week important for Earthling Borough? Well, in 2018, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, declared a climate emergency as he was concerned by the level of carbon emissions London itself was producing. He wants to make London a zero carbon city, so no carbon levels. It's the aim of the UK government to be net zero carbon by the year 2050. Although this week focuses on London, there are lots of lessons and discussions taking place that apply to people across the country. We can look at examples in London and see how we can apply them to our town to help reduce the carbon emissions and pollution that we produce. London is not the sole cause of climate change, and we all have our part to play. So with that in mind, these are the kind of things that we want you to do this week. So our first activity is called Sort That Rubbish. Now, so much of what we use is thrown away as rubbish, but should it be put in the bin, or could it be recycled? If we recycle things, we are using less of those natural resources and therefore producing less carbon emissions. So for this activity, cut and sort the rubbish into the correct recycling bins. You have cans, paper and card, plastic, compost, glass, clothes, reusable items, and other recycling. Our second activity is recycle. In East Northants, we have two recycling options at home. A green bin, which can be used for paper, plastic packaging, card and cardboard, cans, tins, plastic bottles, aerosol cans, glass jars, bottles, and foil. And then a silver caddy for raw meat or cooked meat and fish, leftover food, fruit and vegetable peelings, tea bags, and coffee grounds, eggshells, cooking oils and fats, and nutshells. What we'd like you to do is design a poster to display in your home, or it could be to display in school, to encourage your family members and friends to recycle as much as possible. Our third activity for you to have a look at is called Save That Energy. So did you know that saving energy is another way that we can help protect and look after our environment? Most of the energy provided in the UK is created by burning the burning of fossil fuels, and so contributes to the production of CO2, carbon dioxide. Try and complete as many of the energy saving tasks as possible over the next week. You can use this grid to help you keep track of how well you are doing. There is also space on the sheet for you to come up with your own ideas of how you could help to save energy. Maybe you could turn it into a bit of a competition with the people at home as well, who can do 7 out of 7. Our fourth activity is Dear Mr Pursglove. How about you write a letter to your local MP, Mr Pursglove, about the changes that could be made in and around Earthlinborough to help reduce carbon emissions in our local area. You might like to suggest introducing bins with recycling options as well as rubbish waste on the high street, so people can recycle when they're out and about and not just at home. You might like to suggest something like a pedestrian area or public transport only areas to encourage people to maybe not drive everywhere or drive as much as they do. And then encouraging maybe residents to plant a tree in a community garden. Those trees are really important in the carbon cycle. And then our fifth activity is Let's Tackle Global Warming. Make a list or a diagram of ideas on how you could help to reduce carbon emissions further. You might like to do some research about this to see what's already being done in other places, or you might have your own ideas already. So for example, you could encourage your family where possible to buy locally farmed food to reduce their carbon footprint. When you next see food coming in when you've been to the shops, check the packets. Very often they say where that food has come from. And if it's come from another country, you need to think about how has that food travelled here. Transporting things by boat is not as bad as flying food, as both travel itself and manufacturing of the transport have higher levels of CO2. But if we are able to shop locally sourced foods, we cut out that transport altogether, and therefore reduce the carbon footprint massively. You might also be something like seeking alternative transport, for example, public buses and trains when you travel. Think about, do you need to drive or could you walk somewhere? And then our bonus activities, if you get the chance to, if you'd like to do some more work, look on Purple Mash. There is a section on the environment in the geography topics area, which has lots of different activities on there that you could have a go at, such as creating a walk to school poster, a conserving resources poster, a recycling debate, or there's also somewhere that you can make your recycling poster on there too. Remember, whatever you do, we'd love to see it. Email into your teachers or tweet your work as well and let everybody else see your fantastic ideas. We look forward to seeing what you come up with.